Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight I've got a story that's perfect to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. A timeless tale of curiosity, magic, and a forest full of secrets. We're about to step into the quiet, sun-dappled woods where a little cottage stands, home to a family of 3 bears. And in this forest, just beyond the trees, a curious girl with golden hair is about to discover wonders she never imagined. This is the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. A gentle, immersive journey that will carry you deep into a world of warmth, magic, and the timeless rhythm of the forest. While it's a classic, you've never heard it like this before. But before we get going, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. Make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know where you're listening from. Then sit back and relax. Get under a blanket and turn a fan on for some perfect white noise, and let's get going. It's time for a classic fairy tale, reimagined. Once upon a time, in a land where the sunlight fell in long golden ribbons through the trees, and the air always smelled faintly of pine and honey, there was a young girl named Goldilocks. Her hair was as bright as ripened wheat, tumbling past, her shoulders in curls that caught the light whenever she turned her head. She lived with her mother at the edge of a great forest, a forest so wide and deep that even the oldest villagers said it had no end. Goldilocks had always been curious. She liked to wander further than she should, down winding trails and over mossy stones, always searching for something new. A bird's nest, a wildflower no one had seen before, a hidden pool where the water shimmered like glass. Her mother often warned her not to stray too far, for the woods were full of mysteries. Some were beautiful, others less so. But Goldilocks, for all her charm and sweetness, had a heart that leaned toward adventure. One morning, she woke early to the sound of a woodpecker drumming somewhere near her window. The world outside was quiet and silver with dew. A thin mist drifted low among the trees, curling around the ferns like smoke. Goldilocks dressed quickly, fastening her small cloak at her neck and tying her shoes with neat bows. She meant only to take a short walk, or so she told herself. But as she stepped beyond the garden gate, the forest seemed to beckon her forward, whispering through the leaves. The deeper she went, the softer the sounds of the village became. The rustle of the treetops replaced the chatter of the morning market. The hum of bees took the place of the clanging of pots. The forest was alive in its own quiet way. A squirrel darted up a tree trunk, its tiny claws scratching against the bark. A rabbit paused mid-hop to stare at her, its nose twitching. Overhead, sunlight broke through in warm golden patches, turning the forest floor into a pattern of light and shadow. Goldilocks followed a narrow path she had never noticed before. It wound between the trees like a ribbon, leading her deeper and deeper into the heart of the woods. She thought of turning back once or twice, when the air grew cooler, or when the canopy above grew thick enough to dim the light. But curiosity tugged at her like an invisible hand. After a while, she came upon a clearing. It was quiet, except for the soft rustle of wind through the branches. At its center stood a small cottage. Its roof was made of dark wooden shingles, its walls of smooth-cut logs stacked neatly together. A thin trail of smoke rose from the chimney, curling lazily into the air. The windows were open, and a faint smell of something warm and sweet drifted out, something like oats and honey and butter. Goldilocks stopped at the edge of the clearing, her heart fluttering. It was rare to find a house this deep in the forest. The villagers said no one lived beyond the river bend, and yet here it was, tidy, quiet, and inviting. She looked around. There were no sounds of people, no horses, no footsteps, only the whisper of the forest. She stepped closer. The garden around the house was small but well kept, with rows of herbs and flowers growing in neat clusters. A tiny wooden bench sat beside the door, and a pair of muddy boots rested neatly underneath it. The front door, she noticed, was slightly ajar. Goldilocks hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her mind. "Don't go poking about where you don't belong." But curiosity, as always, was stronger than caution. She took one more step, and the wooden boards creaked softly beneath her shoes. "Hello?" she called gently. "Is anyone home?" No answer came. Only the wind, sighing softly through the trees. She waited a moment longer, then pushed the door open a little wider. Inside, the cottage was warm and golden, filled with the smell of porridge and polished wood. A small fire burned in the hearth, and beside it stood a sturdy wooden table. Upon the table were 3 bowls of porridge, one large, one medium-sized, and one quite small. Steam rose from each of them, curling lazily toward the ceiling. Goldilocks stepped inside without meaning to. The floor creaked beneath her feet, and a beam of sunlight slanted through the window, lighting up the dust motes that hung in the air. Everything inside was neat and charming. There were woven rugs on the floor, wooden chairs carved with careful patterns, and shelves lined with jars of berries and honey. She took another step toward the table, drawn by the scent. Her stomach rumbled softly. She hadn't eaten since dawn. But before she touched anything, she paused. Who lived here? There were signs of life everywhere. A heavy chair pushed slightly away from the table, a wooden spoon resting in a bowl. A cloak hung neatly on a peg by the door. Whoever they were, they couldn't be far. Goldilocks' eyes drifted toward the window, half expecting to see someone returning from the woods, perhaps an old woman gathering herbs, or a kindly woodcutter. But no one appeared. Only the forest beyond, shimmering in the mid-morning light. She bit her lip. Her sense of curiosity hummed again. "Well," she whispered softly, "maybe I'll just look around a little." And with that, she crossed the room toward the table, unaware that deep among the trees 3 figures were making their way home. They were not people exactly. They were bears, great, gentle, clever creatures who lived together in that tidy little cottage, and who were, at that very moment, chatting pleasantly about their morning walk. But Goldilocks did not know that yet. She leaned over the table, breathing in the warm, sweet scent of porridge. And so began the day that would be remembered, by bears and by villagers alike, as the curious misadventure of the girl with the golden hair. Goldilocks stood in the quiet cottage, the sunlight falling across the wooden table where 3 bowls of porridge waited, steaming gently in the air. Each bowl was different, the largest carved with thick handles, sturdy and well-worn, the middle one smoother, rimmed with a delicate line of painted flowers, and the smallest set upon a matching saucer, no larger than her 2 hands pressed together. Her curiosity sparked like a struck match. She could see that each bowl belonged to someone different, a family perhaps, but she wondered what kind of family lived here, hidden deep in the forest, in a cottage so tidy and warm. Her stomach rumbled again. She stepped closer. "Well," she murmured softly, "it wouldn't hurt to have a taste, just to see what it's like." She reached for the largest bowl first. The spoon was heavy, made of rough wood, polished smooth with age. She dipped it into the porridge and brought a small bite to her lips. The moment it touched her tongue, she winced and drew back. "Oh," she gasped, "that's far too hot." She fanned her mouth with her hand, pacing in a little circle until the sting faded. The steam still curled thickly from the bowl. Whoever had made it had only just left the kitchen. Goldilocks set the spoon down carefully and turned to the next bowl, the one with painted flowers. The porridge in this one looked creamier, and the steam rose more gently. She tasted a spoonful, just a tiny one. The flavor was nice, sweet, with just a hint of salt. But when she swallowed, she frowned slightly. "Too cold," she said aloud, shaking her head. "It's gone all stiff." She sighed and looked to the 3rd bowl, the smallest of all. It looked perfect, really. The right color, the right size, and the steam rising from it was soft and inviting. She leaned down, testing it first with her breath, then took a cautious spoonful. This time her face lit up. "Oh," she said, again but in delight. "This one is just right." The porridge was warm and sweet, thickened just enough to coat the spoon. It tasted faintly of cinnamon and honey, as if someone had made it with care and love. She tried another spoonful, then another. Before she quite realized it, she had eaten nearly all of it, scraping the bottom of the little bowl with the spoon. Goldilocks set it down, her appetite satisfied, and her curiosity still humming. She looked around the cottage again. It was such a charming little place. The walls were lined with shelves filled with trinkets, smooth river stones, carved wooden toys, and tiny jars labeled with names like juniper and rose hips. Near the window, a pot of yellow flowers turned toward the sun. Everything about the cottage felt peaceful, but she couldn't help wondering more and more about the people, or creatures, who lived here. They seemed careful, tidy, even gentle. The chairs around the table, for instance, were each suited to a different size of person. The first chair, the largest, was made of thick oak, its back carved with swirls that looked like curling leaves. It was sturdy enough to hold someone enormous. The second was graceful, shaped with a round seat and painted edges. The third, small and low to the ground, had a simple cushion made of patchwork fabric. Goldilocks stepped toward them. "Well," she said softly, "perhaps I'll sit for a moment." She climbed up into the largest chair first. The wood groaned under her weight, and though she tried to sit straight, her feet dangled far above the floor. "My goodness," she said, laughing to herself. "This one is far too big." So she slid down and tried the next chair. It fit her better, but when she leaned back, it rocked and tilted so much that she nearly slid right out of it. "Oh, too soft," she said, steadying herself and standing up again. Then she turned to the smallest chair. It looked quite comfortable, though a bit narrow. She sat carefully, and this time it was perfect. "Ah," she said, smiling. "This one's just right." She rested there a moment, gazing around the room. She could hear the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth and the soft ticking of a small clock on the mantel. The air smelled of porridge and pinewood. For a while, Goldilocks sat very still, thinking how peaceful it felt in this little cottage. She imagined the family that must live here, perhaps a kind father who chopped wood, a gentle mother who kept the home neat and filled with warmth, and a cheerful child whose laughter echoed through the rooms. But as she sat there, the chair gave a sudden creak. Then another. Goldilocks frowned and shifted her weight. There was a sharp crack, and before she knew what had happened, the chair gave way beneath her. She tumbled backward with a gasp, landing in a tangle of wood and fabric. The cushion flew up and landed squarely on her head. "Oh no," she cried, springing to her feet. The chair was broken clean through the middle, its legs splayed apart. "I didn't mean to do that." She looked around anxiously, half expecting someone to come rushing in, but the cottage remained still and silent. Goldilocks dusted herself off, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Perhaps I should go," she whispered. But when she turned toward the door, her gaze caught on a narrow stairway leading up to the second floor. The steps were carved from smooth wood and worn slightly in the middle, as though walked upon often. From above came the faintest hint of something, not a noise exactly, but the feeling of quiet presence. Goldilocks hesitated. She knew she should leave. She had eaten someone's food and broken someone's chair, but her curiosity, mischievous and bright as ever, refused to be dimmed. "Just a peek," she murmured. "Then I'll go." And with careful steps, she began to climb the stairs. Outside in the distance, the sound of footsteps rustled through the forest leaves, 3 sets of them, heavy, steady, and drawing closer to the clearing where the little cottage waited. Far down the winding forest path, beneath the tall green canopy and the hush of morning birds, 3 bears made their way home. There was Father Bear, large and broad-shouldered, with fur the color of old chestnut wood and a voice deep enough to make the forest floor tremble when he spoke. He carried a bundle of freshly gathered herbs in one paw and a walking stick in the other, though, truth be told, he rarely needed it. Beside him strode Mother Bear, graceful for her size, her fur softer and lighter like spun caramel. She had kind eyes that caught the sunlight whenever she turned her head, and she hummed softly as she walked, a tune that echoed faintly through the trees. And between them trotted Little Bear, their cub, no taller than a chair leg, but endlessly, full of energy. His fur was still downy in places, and his steps made soft pattering sounds on the forest floor. He carried a small woven basket full of berries and mushrooms he had picked all by himself. They had gone walking early that morning, as they often did, to let their porridge cool before breakfast. The forest was their home. Every glade and hollow known to them, every rustle of the leaves familiar and comforting. Father Bear took a long breath of the crisp air. "Ah," he said, his voice rumbling low. "Smells like rain coming this afternoon. We'll need to gather firewood after we eat," Mother Bear nodded. "And mend the shutter on the kitchen window," she added. It creaked all through the night. Little Bear swung his basket proudly. "I found the red ones this time. The good kind." His parents smiled. "You did well, my dear," said Mother Bear warmly. Soon the trees began to thin, and the path opened into the sunny clearing where their cottage stood, tidy, cozy, and quiet. Smoke still rose gently from the chimney, but as they came closer, Mother Bear's brow furrowed. "That's strange," she murmured. "Didn't we close the door?" Father Bear slowed his steps. The door was indeed ajar, swaying faintly in the breeze. He set down his herbs and straightened to his full height, his shadow stretching long across the grass. "Stay behind me," he said softly, his deep voice calm but firm. They moved cautiously toward the house, the boards of the porch creaking under their paws. Father Bear pushed the door open wider and peered inside. The warm scent of porridge still filled the air, but there was something else now too, the faint trace of something unfamiliar, something human. He stepped into the kitchen and his eyes went straight to the table. "My bowl," he said, his voice echoing through the small room. "Someone's been tasting my porridge," Mother Bear gasped, rushing to the middle bowl. "And someone's been tasting mine too." Little Bear scrambled up to his chair and peered at his tiny bowl, the spoon still resting inside, the porridge all but gone. His eyes went wide. "Someone's eaten all of mine," he cried, his voice a small shocked squeak. The three bears looked around the kitchen in astonishment. Nothing else seemed disturbed, but the air felt different now, as though the cottage had been gently stirred by an unseen hand. Father Bear sniffed the air again. "They must still be nearby," he said, glancing toward the chairs. When he saw the broken one, splintered legs, and the cushion on the floor, his frown deepened. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," he growled. Mother Bear stepped closer, touching the arm of hers lightly. "And someone sat in mine as well," she said. Little Bear, meanwhile, stood beside the pile of broken wood and pointed. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," he said, his small voice trembling. "And they broke it." There was a moment of silence. The fire in the hearth popped softly. Outside, a crow called once and then fell quiet again. Father Bear's ears twitched. He looked toward the stairway. "Upstairs," he murmured. "Whoever it was, they may still be here." Mother Bear nodded, drawing Little Bear gently behind her. "Be careful," she whispered. Father Bear placed one heavy paw on the first step. The stairs creaked beneath his weight. He began to climb, each slow step sounding like a drumbeat in the stillness of the house. At that very moment, Goldilocks had reached the top of those same stairs. The upper floor was smaller, with slanted ceilings and wooden beams. 3 neat beds stood in a row beside the window, one large, one middle-sized, and one quite small. Sunlight poured through the window panes, casting golden stripes across the quilts. Goldilocks stood at the doorway, still catching her breath from the climb. Her heart was thudding, partly from curiosity, partly from guilt. She hadn't meant to stay this long. She hadn't meant to touch anything at all, but everything in the house was so perfect, so warm, so welcoming. She stepped quietly to the first bed. The blanket was thick and heavy, woven of coarse wool and tucked neatly under the pillows. She pressed her hand to it. "Oh my," she whispered. "This one's far too hard." She moved to the second bed, covered in a quilt of blue and green patches. It looked softer, and when she sat down, she sank almost halfway into it. "Too soft," she said, half laughing, half sighing. Then she turned to the smallest bed. It was tidy and sweet, with a small pillow stitched with tiny red flowers. She sat down, and it felt perfect. Not too hard, not too soft, but just right. Goldilocks smiled faintly. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the forest outside shimmered with dappled light. She hadn't realized how tired she was until now. She lay back, meaning only to rest a moment. The quilt was warm. The pillow smelled faintly of wild mint. Her eyelids grew heavy. Within moments, the curious girl had fallen sound asleep. Downstairs, the 3 bears had reached the top of the staircase. Father Bear's deep voice rumbled softly. "Stay behind me." The door to the bedroom stood open. Sunlight streamed out across the hall floor, and from within came the quiet, steady sound of breathing, small, peaceful, and unmistakably human. The door to the bedroom creaked open on its wooden hinges. A line of sunlight spilled across the hallway floor as Father Bear stepped inside, his shadow stretching long behind him. The room was still, except for the faint, soft sound of breathing. And there, fast asleep in Little Bear's bed, lay a small human girl with hair like gold spun from the morning sun. The three bears froze. For a moment, not one of them moved. Father Bear blinked once, slowly, as if to be sure his eyes were telling him the truth. Mother Bear's paw flew to her mouth in surprise. Little Bear peered around her side, eyes wide with awe. "Goodness gracious," whispered Mother Bear. "What is she?" Father Bear took a cautious step closer, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to make the floorboards hum. "A child," he said quietly. "A human child," Little Bear gasped. "A real one? In our house?" Mother Bear frowned, tilting her head. "Look at her hair. It shines like sunlight." Goldilocks stirred slightly, turning her face toward the pillow. Her strand of golden hair fell across her cheek. Father Bear lowered his voice even further. She must have wandered in from the village, lost, perhaps, or curious. Little Bear climbed halfway onto the edge of his mother's skirt, whispering, "She ate my porridge." Mother Bear gave him a gentle nudge. "Hush, dear, we'll wake her." But it was too late. Goldilocks' lashes fluttered. She gave a soft sigh, and then her eyes opened, slow, drowsy, uncomprehending at first. She blinked up at the ceiling, then turned her head slightly and froze. 3 pairs of eyes were staring down at her. For an instant, no one said a word. The room hung in silence, heavy as the air before a storm. Goldilocks sat up, her breath catching in her throat. "Oh," she gasped, scrambling backward on the bed. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. 3 bears stood before her, real, towering, and magnificent. Their fur gleamed in the morning light, and though their faces were calm, their presence filled the little room like thunderclouds. Father Bear stepped back slightly, raising one paw in a gesture of peace. His deep voice rolled through the air, slow and steady. Now, he said gently. "No harm will come to you, little one." Goldilocks couldn't speak. Her eyes darted from Father Bear's great paws to Mother Bear's kind amber eyes, and finally to Little Bear, who was peeking at her from behind his mother's leg. Mother Bear spoke next, her tone soft and melodic. "My dear, are you lost?" Goldilocks opened her mouth but found no words. Her throat felt tight, her hands trembling in her lap. I didn't mean," she stammered finally. I thought no one lived here." Little Bear tilted his head, his round ears twitching. "You ate my porridge," he said, matter-of-factly. Goldilocks' cheeks flushed bright red. I'm sorry," she said quickly. "It just smelled so good, and I was hungry and—" Father Bear cleared his throat softly, a sound like distant thunder. "And our chairs?" he asked, one brow lifting. Goldilocks looked down at her hands. I sat in them," she admitted. "And one broke." Mother Bear glanced at her husband, then back at the girl. "You are honest, at least," she said kindly. "That counts for something." Goldilocks looked up then, meeting the bear's gaze for the first time. Mother Bear's expression was not angry, only surprised, perhaps even a little concerned. "I didn't mean to break anything," Goldilocks said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to look around. Your house is so lovely." Little Bear's small eyes softened. "You really think so?" "Oh yes," said Goldilocks. "It's warm and cozy and smells like honey and pine wood. I've never seen anything like it." That made Mother Bear smile, just a little. "We built it together," she said proudly. "My husband cut the logs himself." Father Bear gave a small nod, his expression easing. "We do not often have visitors," he said, "and never a human one." Goldilocks' curiosity began to stir again, even through her fear. "You built all of this yourselves?" Little Bear nodded eagerly. "Even my chair?" "Well, Papa helped, but I painted it." Goldilocks couldn't help but smile. "You did a fine job." The room seemed to breathe again. The tension faded just a little, replaced by a strange and gentle understanding. Still, Father Bear's brow furrowed. "You must have wandered far from home," he said. "Does your family know where you are?" Goldilocks swallowed hard. "No," she admitted. I went walking this morning, and I just kept going. The path disappeared behind me. I didn't mean to get lost." Mother Bear's eyes softened with sympathy. "Poor dear," she murmured. "You must have been frightened." Goldilocks nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "At first, but your cottage felt so safe." At that, the three bears exchanged glances. Father Bear sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Safe," he repeated quietly. "Well, we can hardly be angry about that." Little Bear climbed up onto the edge of his bed, or what was left of it beside Goldilocks, and tilted his head toward her. "Are you still hungry?" Goldilocks blinked in surprise. "Hungry?" He nodded. "There's still some porridge. So left. The kind you didn't eat." Mother Bear chuckled softly. "Little one, you're too kind," she said, smoothing his fur. "But perhaps we should start fresh." Father Bear nodded thoughtfully. "Agreed, let's all go downstairs. We'll make another pot. And then," he added, glancing kindly at Goldilocks, "we'll see you safely back to your village." Goldilocks hesitated. She was still nervous, still unsure. But something in his voice, low and steady and kind, made her trust him. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet touching the smooth wooden floor. "All right," she said, softly. As they turned toward the stairs, a gentle breeze drifted in through the open window, carrying with it the sound of leaves whispering outside, as though the forest itself was sighing in relief. For now, at least, the girl with the golden hair and the family of bears had found a fragile peace. But the day was not yet over, and, before it ended, Goldilocks would learn that the forest still had secrets waiting for her. Secrets even the bears themselves did not fully know. The stairs creaked softly beneath their feet as the four of them made their way back down to the main room. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, glinting on the polished wood and the rows of jars that lined the shelves. The air still carried the scent of warm oats and pine. Goldilocks followed close behind the bears, careful this time not to touch anything she shouldn't. She felt very small beside Father Bear's towering frame, though there was something steady and reassuring about the way he moved. Mother Bear's steps were slow and graceful, her apron brushing softly against the floor. Little Bear bounded ahead, full of energy once more, as if having a human guest in the house had instantly become the most exciting thing in the world. Buntifas, they reached the kitchen. Father Bear knelt beside the fireplace and began to stir the coals, sending up a puff of soft grey ash. "We'll need a fresh fire," he said. Goldilocks hesitated, then offered, "I can help if you like." Mother Bear turned to her with a warm smile. "That's kind of you, dear. Could you fetch a few of those sticks from the basket by the door?" Goldilocks nodded eagerly. She gathered a small armful and brought them over, careful not to spill the dust onto the floor. Father Bear took them with a nod of approval and arranged them neatly in the hearth. Soon the fire caught, flames, crackling cheerfully in the dim light. The kitchen began to fill once more with warmth. Mother Bear filled a pot from the water jug and set it over the flame. "This time," she said with a playful glance toward Goldilocks, "we'll make sure everyone has enough." Little Bear climbed onto his stool beside the table and began to sort through his basket of berries. "Look, Mama, the red ones are the sweetest." Goldilocks smiled, watching him pick through the little heap of fruit with such care. "You really did find good ones," she said. He puffed up proudly. "I always do. I know where the best bushes grow, down by the creek, past the big fallen tree." "Ah," said Father Bear, glancing over from the hearth, "but you have to watch for foxes down that way. They like those berries too." Little Bear nodded solemnly, as though he were discussing the most serious business in the world. Soon, the smell of cooking porridge filled the air once more. Mother Bear stirred the pot gently, adding honey and milk and a pinch of salt. Goldilocks watched the slow circular motion of the spoon, mesmerized by the simple rhythm of it. It was strange. Only an hour ago she'd been frightened nearly out of her wits. Now, sitting by the fire, she felt oddly calm. safe even, when... The porridge was ready. They all sat together at the table again, each before their own bowl. This time Mother Bear had placed a fourth in front of Goldilocks, a small wooden one she fetched from the cupboard. "I don't have a spare chair, I'm afraid," said Mother Bear apologetically. "That's all right," Goldilocks said quickly. "I can stand." Father Bear frowned thoughtfully. "Nonsense," he said. "A guest should sit." He stood up, crossed to the corner, and returned with a small wooden chest. "Here," he said, setting it by the table. "It's sturdy." "Sit." Goldilocks perched on it gratefully. "Thank you," she said. They ate quietly for a while, the gentle clinking of spoons against bowls filling the silence. The porridge was even better this time, sweet, creamy, and perfectly warm. Goldilocks savoured every bite. When they had finished, Little Bear licked his spoon and looked at her curiously. "So," he said, "what's it like where you live? Do you have a forest too?" Goldilocks thought for a moment. "Not like this," she said. "Our trees are smaller. The air doesn't smell like pine. And we have houses close together. Not like yours." Mother Bear smiled softly. "Villages are busy places, aren't they?" "Yes," Goldilocks said. "Everyone's always rushing about, fetching water, mending roofs, trading at the market. It's never quiet for long." She glanced around the cozy room, where the firelight flickered across the walls and the sound of the wind outside was soft and low. "It's peaceful here," she added quietly. Father Bear leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin. "The forest can be peaceful," he said, "but it can also be wild. It keeps its own secrets." Goldilocks tilted her head. "Secrets?" Mother Bear looked at her husband knowingly. "You mean the old stories again?" Father Bear gave a deep chuckle. "Of course. Every forest has its tales." Little Bear's eyes widened. "Tell her one, Papa. Tell her the story of the Whispering Hollow." Mother Bear laughed softly. "Not that one. It'll frighten her." Goldilocks shook her head. "No, I'd like to hear it," she said eagerly. "If it's not too scary." Father Bear smiled, his deep voice lowering to a storyteller's rumble. "Long ago, before any of us lived here, there was said to be a hollow deep in these woods, a place where the wind could speak. Hunters who wandered too far claimed they heard voices calling their names, leading them off the path. Some said the forest was alive, not in the way trees and roots are alive, but aware. Watching." Goldilocks' eyes went wide. "Did anyone ever find it?" "Not that we know," Father Bear said, "though a few claim they've felt it, that strange stillness when the forest holds its breath." Little Bear shivered with delight. "I think I've heard it once, down near the creek when the fog was thick." Mother Bear rolled her eyes affectionately. "You've heard the wind through the reeds, my love." But Goldilocks wasn't so sure. The forest had felt alive when she'd walked through it that morning, the whisper of the leaves, the shifting light. For a moment she wondered if it really could have been watching her. Father Bear's tone softened. "Still," he said, "the forest isn't cruel, it's only mysterious. It hides what it chooses and reveals what it wishes." Goldilocks nodded slowly. "I think I understand." The fire crackled softly. A peaceful silence fell over the little cottage. After a moment, Mother Bear stood and began to tidy up the bowls. "You should rest a bit before heading home," she said. "The sun's still high and the path is long." Goldilocks hesitated. "I don't want to trouble you." "Nonsense," said Father Bear. "You've had quite a morning." "Little." Bear jumped up. "You can sit by the window, that's my favorite spot." Goldilocks smiled, following him to the nook by the window. Outside, the forest swayed in the afternoon breeze, the leaves whispering like old friends. She pressed her hand to the glass, feeling the faint warmth of the sun. For the first time that day she felt entirely at peace, unaware that beyond the gentle hum of the forest, something had begun to stir. Far beyond the clearing, deep in the shadowed wood, the wind moved differently now. It slid through the branches with a murmur that was almost, but not quite, a voice. The hours drifted by in gentle stillness. Goldilocks sat by the window, the warm light painting her hair in a soft golden haze. Little Bear had long since curled up on a rug near the hearth, his chin resting on his paws, eyes fluttering in that drowsy space between waking and dreaming. Mother Bear was at the table, stitching a patch onto her apron, humming quietly to herself. Father Bear had stepped outside to gather more firewood before dusk. It was, Goldilocks thought, the most peaceful afternoon she could ever remember. From her place by the window, she could see the edge of the forest stretching away, a great ocean of green and gold. Shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy, scattering like ripples across the ferns below. Somewhere far off, a stream whispered through the mossy stones, and the faintest breeze stirred the treetops. And yet, something in that breeze made her pause. It wasn't a sound she could name, not the sigh of the wind nor the call of a bird. It was softer, rounder, almost like a murmur from another room. For a moment she wondered if Father Bear was speaking outside, but the sound didn't come from any one direction. It seemed to come from everywhere. She leaned closer to the window, brow furrowing slightly. "Is something wrong, dear?" Mother Bear asked without looking up from her stitching. Goldilocks hesitated. "I thought I heard something like whispering." Mother Bear smiled faintly. "Ah, the forest is full of whispers," she said. "They travel with the wind. If you listen long enough, you'll hear the trees talking to one another." Goldilocks frowned thoughtfully. "Do you think they really can?" Mother Bear's needle flashed in and out of the cloth. "I think everything that grows has a voice," she said. "We simply forget how to listen." Goldilocks turned back to the window. The wind had stilled again, leaving the forest in a soft hush. For a moment it seemed to be holding its breath, then suddenly a faint rustle. Not the steady rustling of wind in leaves, but something slower, more deliberate. A movement. Goldilocks' heart gave a quick little jump. "Did you hear that?" she asked softly. Mother Bear lifted her head, listening. Then she smiled. "That will be your friend returning," she said. And indeed, a moment later, the door swung open with a gentle creak, and Father Bear stepped inside. His fur was dusted with wood chips, and he carried a heavy bundle of logs under one arm. "Goodness," Mother Bear said, standing to help. "You've brought half the forest in." "With you," he laughed, shaking the leaves from his fur. "It's going to be a cool night," he said. "The air's changing." Goldilocks tilted her head. "Changing how?" He shrugged his broad shoulders. "Hard to say. You can feel it, though, like when the river runs faster before a storm." He stacked the logs neatly beside the hearth, then added one to the fire. The flames flared up, painting the room in a soft orange glow. Goldilocks watched the sparks drift upward, disappearing into the chimney. For reasons she couldn't quite name, the sound of the crackling wood comforted her. It was as though the forest itself was keeping them company, the trees whispering beyond the windows, the fire singing their echoes inside. After a time, Little Bear stirred on the rug and yawned loudly. "Is it evening already?" he mumbled. "Nearly," said Mother Bear, glancing at the window. The light was fading to gold, then amber, then the deep dusky blue of approaching twilight. "We'll light the lantern soon." Goldilocks turned, back toward the forest. The shadows had lengthened, stretching long fingers across the undergrowth. The air outside seemed thicker now, not dark exactly, but heavy with quiet. Then she saw it. A flicker. At first she thought it was a firefly, but the light didn't move like one. It glowed steadily, deep within the trees, and then vanished, just as suddenly as it had appeared. Goldilocks blinked. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "See what?" Little Bear asked, scrambling to his feet. "A light. In the forest." Father Bear crossed to the window, peering out. "Likely the sun catching a stream," he said calmly. "This time of day can play tricks on the eyes." But as he spoke, a second light shimmered, farther to the left this time. A small pale glow that pulsed once, twice, and faded. Mother Bear set down her sewing. "Perhaps it's the will-o'-wisps again," she said softly. Little Bear's ears perked up. "The what?" "Tiny spirits of the marshes," she said with a mysterious smile. "They love to dance at dusk, but you mustn't chase them. They'll lead you far from the path if you do." Goldilocks shivered, though she wasn't sure if it was from fear or fascination. "Have you ever seen them before?" "Oh, once or twice," said Mother Bear. "Always at a distance. Always when the air feels strange like tonight." Father Bear gave a quiet grunt. "Old tales," he said, though his eyes lingered on the window a moment longer than usual. The light flickered once more, faint now, as though it were retreating deeper into the forest. Then all was still. Mother Bear rose and began lighting. The lanterns, one by the table, one near the door. The warm glow pushed back the gathering blue, filling the cottage with a gentle, golden calm. "Best to stay in tonight," she said. "Whatever's out there can dance on its own." Goldilocks nodded, though her gaze lingered on the forest beyond the glass. She felt that same strange pull again, curiosity tinged with wonder. What was out there, beyond the reach of the lantern light? The forest didn't answer, of course. But as the last light faded from the sky, she could have sworn she heard a faint hum like a song just beyond hearing, a lullaby meant for no one drifting through the trees. Father Bear sat down by the fire, rubbing his paws together. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll walk you back to your village, little one. It's getting late and the forest paths twist easy after dark." Goldilocks nodded politely, though her mind was still half in the shadows beyond the window. "Thank you," she said softly. Outside, the forest swayed in the moonlight, vast, ancient, alive, and deep among the trees, something stirred again, a ripple in the leaves, a breath of air colder than before, and the faintest sound, like laughter carried on the wind. Night fell softly over the forest. The moon rose pale and silver above the treetops, its light spilling through the branches in long ribbons that shimmered against the leaves. The air had grown cool and still, carrying the faint scent of moss and pine sap. Inside the bear's cottage, the fire had burned low, glowing with quiet embers. Little Bear slept soundly on a pile of quilts by the hearth, his small paw tucked beneath his chin. Mother Bear was nodding over her sewing, her spectacles sliding halfway down her muzzle. Father Bear sat in his great chair, eyes half closed, a book resting on his lap, and in the corner by the window Goldilocks sat awake. She could not sleep. Her eyes drifted again and again toward the forest beyond the glass, that endless stretch of shadow and silver light. The strange glow she'd seen earlier had not returned, but still she could not shake the feeling that something out there was waiting. Every now and then, she thought she heard it again, a whisper, a hum, like wind across hollow reeds. It wasn't frightening exactly. It was calling, softly, persistently, like a tune she almost recognized but couldn't quite name. She rose from her little chest seat, careful not to wake the others. The wooden floor creaked faintly beneath her. "Bare feet." Father Bear stirred in his chair. Goldilocks froze, but after a moment, he only sighed and turned the page of his book, still half asleep. Quietly, she slipped to the door. The latch was heavy, and she had to lift it slowly so it wouldn't clatter. When the door opened, the cool night air rushed in, fresh and earthy, thick with the scent of ferns and the faint sweetness of flowering vines. She stepped outside. The forest stretched before her, silent but alive. Moonlight pooled in the clearings like silver water, and the trees seemed to lean inward, their leaves whispering secrets among themselves. Goldilocks hesitated at the threshold. She knew she should stay. The bears had been kind, and they'd said the woods could be dangerous after dark. But the song and that faint shimmering hum beckoned. Just a little closer, she told herself, only to the edge. She tiptoed across the clearing, her white dress glowing softly in the moonlight. The grass brushed against her ankles, damp with dew. Every sound seemed louder now. The chirp of a night insect, the snap of a twig beneath her foot, the gentle sigh of the trees. And then she heard it clearly. A voice, soft, distant, melodic. Not words exactly, but a tune made of breath and wind. It wound through the trees like a thread, tugging her forward. Goldilocks followed it. She moved between the trunks, her hand brushing the rough bark as she passed. Ferns brushed her legs. The deeper she went, the brighter the moonlight seemed to grow, until the forest floor shimmered like silver dust. Then she saw it again, the light, not far ahead, glowing faintly among the roots of an ancient oak. It flickered and pulsed just as it had before. Goldilocks stepped closer, heart quickening. As she approached, she saw that it wasn't fire, nor lantern, nor star. It was something else entirely, a cluster of tiny, floating lights, each no larger than a spark, swirling gently in the air. They moved together like a flock of glowing moths, forming patterns that shifted with the rhythm of the breeze. "Oh," she breathed softly. One of the lights drifted toward her, hovering inches from her face. It shimmered gold, then green, then blue, as if it were made of sunlight trapped inside a drop of dew. Tentatively, she reached out a hand. The light hovered a moment longer, then touched her fingertip. A warm, tingling sensation spread up her arm, not painful but strange, like dipping her hand into sunlight, and then, just as suddenly, the light darted away, vanishing into the shadows. Goldilocks gasped and took a step forward, her curiosity now aflame. "Wait!" she whispered. The lights moved deeper into the forest, swirling like a ribbon of color, and she followed, slowly at first, then quicker, weaving between roots and ferns. The forest floor grew uneven beneath her feet. The trees grew taller, closer, their branches twisting above her like great cathedral arches. The air thickened with mist. Still the lights danced ahead, leading her onward. After some time, she couldn't tell how long, she came to a clearing. The moon hung directly overhead, casting its pale light on a pool of still water. The surface was so clear it reflected the sky perfectly, as though a second world lay beneath it. And in the center of that pool floated a single glowing light, brighter than all the rest. Goldilocks stepped to the edge, entranced. The reflection of the moon rippled as she knelt beside the water. The hum had changed now. It was no longer distant. It seemed to rise from the ground itself, from the trees, from the water. A harmony of whispers, soft and sorrowful, filling the air like the breath of the forest. She leaned closer. "Hello?" she whispered. The surface of the pool shimmered, once, twice, then went utterly still. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, faintly, she thought she saw a shape beneath the water. Not her own reflection, but something else, something vast and ancient, like the outline of a face carved from roots and stone. Its eyes glowed faintly, mirroring the color of the will-o'-wisps. Goldilocks. Breath caught in her throat. The lights flickered wildly, swirling faster. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, and the trees shuddered as though exhaling after a long sleep. She stumbled back, her heart pounding. The wind died as suddenly as it had come. The lights vanished. The pool returned to stillness. For a long moment, Goldilocks stood frozen, the forest silent around her. Then a faintly saunter sound reached her ears. "Goldilocks." It was Father Bear's voice calling from far away. "Goldilocks!" The sound echoed through the trees. Relief flooded her chest. She turned and began to run, branches brushing her arms, roots catching at her feet. The glow of the cottages. Lanterns flickered in the distance, warm and golden through the mist. She burst through the trees, breathless, and stumbled into the clearing. Father Bear was there, lantern in hand, his expression stern but concerned. "Child, what are you doing?" "Out here," he said. She hesitated, glancing back at the dark forest behind her. "I saw something, lights, I thought..." But when she turned, the forest was silent, empty. Father Bear sighed deeply. "The forest plays tricks at night," he said gently. "It can make you see what isn't there." Goldilocks nodded faintly. Though she wasn't sure she believed it, he placed a massive paw on her shoulder. "Come now," he said. "You're safe. Let's go inside." As they walked back toward the cottage, she glanced over her shoulder one last time, and far back in the trees, where the light of the lanterns couldn't reach, she thought she saw one tiny spark, still glowing, pulsing once, twice, before fading back into the dark. Morning came softly, wrapped in mist. The first light of dawn spilled over the treetops like warm honey, dripping down through the branches until it reached the cottage windows. Inside, the bears were already stirring. Mother Bear humming as she kneaded dough, Father Bear chopping kindling by the door, and Little Bear chasing a patch of sunlight across the floor. Goldilocks sat quietly by the hearth, her hands cupped around a warm mug of tea. She hadn't slept much. The memory of the forest lingered behind her eyes. The lights, the hum, that face beneath the water. Every time she blinked, she could almost see it again. Its great, calm eyes glowing from beneath the rippling pool. "Did you rest at all, dear?" Mother Bear asked gently, glancing up from her dough. Goldilocks hesitated. "A little," she said. but I kept dreaming about the forest." Mother Bear smiled faintly. "Ah, it does that to visitors. The forest always finds its way into your dreams." Goldilocks looked toward the window. Outside, the mist hung thick between the trees, turning the world to shades of silver and white. "Does it ever speak to you?" she asked quietly. Father Bear paused mid-swing with his hatchet. "Speak?" Goldilocks nodded. "I think I heard it last night. A voice, or maybe a song. It sounded sad." The bears exchanged a look. "Finally," Father Bear set down his hatchet and brushed the wood dust from his paws. "You wandered farther than you should have, child," he said evenly. "There are places in these woods that are older than any of us. They remember things we've long forgotten." Mother Bear folded her dough and placed it in a pan. "Your father means," she said softly, "that the forest has a memory. Some say it keeps the stories of those who once lived beneath its shade." Goldilocks tilted her head. "Stories?" "Old ones," said Father Bear, "from before there were villages or roads or even names for the stars." He stirred the fire and a shower of sparks rose up the chimney. "Most of them are harmless, but some places hold echoes." Goldilocks felt a shiver crawl along her arms. "Echoes of what?" Father Bear looked into the fire. "Of voices, of wishes, of things that never quite faded." For a moment the only sound was the crackling of the wood. Then Little Bear, who had been listening wide-eyed, tugged at Goldilocks' sleeve. "Maybe the forest was trying to talk to you," he said brightly. Father Bear chuckled. "Let's hope not. It's trouble enough when it talks to the wind." But Goldilocks wasn't laughing. The memory of the face beneath the water came rushing back, vast and ancient, but not unkind. It hadn't felt like danger. It had felt lonely. She took a slow sip of her tea. "Maybe," she said softly, "it wasn't trying to scare me. Maybe it just wanted to be heard." Mother Bear's eyes softened. "You have a gentle heart, child," she said, "but you must be careful with wonder. It can lead you far from where you began." Goldilocks nodded, though her gaze lingered on the misty trees beyond the window. When breakfast was ready, they ate together at the table, warm bread with honey, and milk so fresh it still tasted of the meadow. The conversation drifted to simple things: the weather, the coming harvest, the clearing Father Bear planned to tend for new berry bushes. But part of Goldilocks' mind stayed elsewhere, tugged toward the forest's edge. After they'd eaten, Father Bear stood and stretched. "I'll walk you home now," he said kindly. "The path will be clearer in daylight." Goldilocks hesitated. "If it's all right, I'd like to stay a little longer." Mother Bear raised an eyebrow. "You've had quite an adventure." "Already?" she said gently. "Are you sure?" Goldilocks nodded. "Just until the sun's higher. I think I need to see something." Father Bear studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Stay close to the clearing," he said. "And if you hear anything strange, you come back. Promise me." "I promise." She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped out into the morning. The mist had begun to thin, curling upward like breath. The forest floor was damp and soft beneath her shoes. Every branch dripped with dew, and the air shimmered with that quiet, living energy she had felt the night before. The sense that everything around her was aware. She followed the same path. As before, her heart beating steadily but not fearfully. The birds were beginning to sing now, soft, tentative notes that echoed like questions between the trees. When she reached the clearing with the pool, she stopped. It looked different. In the daylight. The water was still, glassy, reflecting the pale sky above. There was no sign of glowing lights, no trace of faces beneath the surface, only her own reflection and the slow ripples of falling leaves. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined it all. Then, faintly, she heard it again. That hum. It rose not from the air this time, but from beneath her feet, a deep vibration, gentle and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Goldilocks knelt by the water's edge, pressing her hand to the ground. "Hello?" she whispered. The hum deepened. The surface of the pool quivered, and tiny circles spread outward from the center. Goldilocks' breath caught. "I can hear you," she said softly. "But I don't understand." A breeze stirred the trees. The water rippled, and faintly in the reflection she saw something move. Not the face this time, but roots. Endless, tangled roots spreading beneath the ground, like veins of shadow and light, and within them, a whisper. Not a word, exactly. More like a feeling, a memory. Images flashed through her mind. The forest as it once was, vast and wild, ancient trees falling in storms, tiny saplings growing in their place, creatures coming and going, the first cottage built beside the stream. The generations that had lived and gone, leaving only footprints and echoes behind. The forest wasn't calling her. It was showing her. She gasped and stumbled back, her hand flying to her chest. The vision faded. The hum softened, then disappeared. Altogether. For a long time she sat still, her heart racing but her mind strangely calm. She understood somehow what it had meant, that everything living in the forest, tree, root, animal, stone, was connected. That time, in the forests, eyes moved not in lines but in circles. A twig snapped behind her. Goldilocks turned quickly. Father Bear stood there at the edge of the clearing, his lantern in hand though the morning light glowed bright. "I thought you might come here," he said. His deep voice was gentle, not scolding. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Goldilocks hesitated. Then she smiled faintly. "I think I did," she said. He nodded once as though he somehow understood. "Then let's go home." Together, they walked back toward the cottage. The mist had nearly lifted now, and shafts of sunlight pierced through the branches like golden arrows. As they crossed the clearing, Goldilocks glanced back one last time at the pool. The surface was still again, calm and perfect. But for just a moment, she thought she saw a faint shimmer ripple across it, like the forest giving a slow, approving nod. By midday, the forest was alive with sunlight. The mist had vanished entirely, leaving the clearing bright and golden. Birds called cheerfully from the treetops, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves in soft waves. Inside the cottage, the bears were bustling with purpose. Mother Bear had prepared a second breakfast, more lavish this time. Thick slices of honeyed bread, warm berries from Little Bear's basket, and creamy porridge still steaming from the pot. The scent filled the cottage, curling around every corner and seeming to embrace the whole space. Goldilocks helped where she could, carrying small plates to the table, stirring a pot of milk with a careful hand, and placing Little Bear's favorite, berries in a tiny dish beside him. "This is wonderful," she said, smiling. "I don't think I've ever eaten like this." Father Bear chuckled from his chair, where he was arranging logs for the fire. "A proper breakfast is worth a bit of work," he said, his deep voice warm and steady. "And a proper farewell deserves even more." Goldilocks tilted her head. "Farewell?" she asked softly. Mother Bear gave her a gentle smile. "You will be returning home today, child, but before you go, we thought we should have a proper meal together, a feast of sorts." Little Bear clapped his paws with excitement. "A feast?" he cried. "Can we have extra honey?" "Of course," Mother Bear said, laughing. She filled a small bowl and set it before him. The four of them sat together at the table, enjoying the meal slowly, deliberately. Goldilocks savored every bite. The warm bread, the sweet honey, the tart berries, the creamy porridge. But more than the food, she savored the company. The calm presence of Father Bear, the gentle attentiveness of Mother Bear, and the infectious delight of Little Bear. As they ate, Father Bear spoke softly. "You know, child, most humans never see the forest as it truly is. They walk through blind to the life and the stories it holds. But you listened." Goldilocks blinked, unsure what to say. "Every forest," he continued, "is alive, in its own way. It has memory, it has voice, it has patience, and sometimes it chooses someone to understand it." Goldilocks felt warmth spread through her chest. "You mean it chose me?" Father Bear nodded once. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it merely revealed itself to you because you were ready to see." Mother Bear reached across the table, brushing Goldilocks, hand with her paw. "We've enjoyed your visit more than we can say," she said, "and though it is time for you to return home, remember this. The forest is always here, and it will remember you, just as you remember it." Little Bear leaned against Goldilocks, a small smile on his face. "Will you come back?" he asked quietly. Goldilocks stroked his fur gently. I would love to. When the meal was finished, they lingered by the table for a while, talking quietly about small things. The first flowers of spring, the birds who nested in the treetops, and the hidden corners of the forest that were especially magical. Every word felt important, every glance significant. Finally, Father Bear stood, towering and calm. "It's time," he said softly. Goldilocks nodded. She gathered her things, a small satchel with a few items she had brought with her, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and followed the bears outside. The forest was radiant in the late morning sun. Leaves sparkled with dew, birds flitted between branches, and the earth smelled fresh and alive. Goldilocks paused at the edge of the clearing, taking it all in. Mother Bear spoke first. "Remember, child, the forest is not only trees and streams. It is patience, it is memory, it is life itself. Respect it and it will always welcome you." Little Bear hugged her tightly. "Goodbye, Goldilocks," he said, his small voice full of hope. Father Bear rumbled softly, his deep voice like the calm of the earth itself. "Farewell, child, walk safely." Goldilocks smiled, a lump rising in her throat. "Thank you for everything," she said. And then, slowly, she turned and began to walk back along the path toward her village. She could hear the faint rustle of the leaves behind her, as if the forest itself were waving goodbye. Every step she took, the clearing and the cottage faded behind her, but the memory of warmth, safety, and wonder remained, carried with her like a hidden ember, ready to light any shadow she might encounter in the world beyond. Far above, the sun climbed higher, casting its golden rays through the branches, and the forest seemed to sigh. It was alive, it was patient, and it had chosen to let her see its stories, and Goldilocks knew she would never forget. Goldilocks walked slowly along the winding path that led from the forest toward her village. The morning sun warmed her back, and the air smelled of damp earth and wildflowers. Every step reminded her of the adventure she had just lived. The cottage, the bears, the whispering forest, the lights that had called to her in the night. Though the path was familiar now, it still held a sense of wonder. Every tree seemed taller, every shadow more alive, every bird call sweeter than she remembered from before her journey. As she walked, she thought about the bears. She remembered Father Bear's steady voice, Mother Bear's gentle patience, and Little Bear's boundless curiosity. She remembered their kindness, the meals they shared, and the quiet understanding that had filled the cottage like sunlight through the windows. And she remembered the forest. It had spoken to her in ways she could barely explain. Its voice had been soft, almost like a memory of another time, of things that had happened long before she was born. It had shown her a glimpse of its heart, ancient, patient, alive, and in return, she had listened. A gentle breeze rustled, the trees carrying with it a faint hum, familiar and comforting. Goldilocks paused and smiled. She understood now. The forest did not need her to act, or to solve a mystery, or to claim its secrets. It only asked to be seen, to be acknowledged, and she had done that. Her village came into view. Smoke rose lazily from the chimneys, and the distant sound of children's laughter drifted through the air. Everything seemed smaller, quieter here, more ordinary than the vibrant life of the forest. And yet, Goldilocks carried the memory of it like a hidden flame, alive and bright. When she arrived home, her family greeted her with relief and curiosity. They noticed the light in her eyes, the strange calm in her voice. She told them nothing of the magical night, the lights, or the whispers beneath the roots. Words could never fully capture the wonder she had witnessed. Instead, she smiled and said simply, "The forest is alive. It is kind and it is patient. It has stories older than time itself. One day you will see them too." Her family nodded, accepting the words as a child's fancy, unaware of the truth behind them. But Goldilocks did not mind. She knew. And that was enough. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Goldilocks returned to her ordinary life, but the memory of the forest remained with her. She thought of the bears often, wondering how they fared, picturing them in their cozy cottage with the smell of honey and pine wood filling the air. She imagined Little Bear discovering a new patch of berries, Mother Bear humming while she worked, Father Bear quietly chopping wood as the sun rose, and sometimes when the wind was right, she would hear it, that faint, gentle hum, threading, through the leaves and grass. It was the forest reminding her that it was always there, waiting, patient, eternal. One day, Goldilocks promised herself she would return. She would walk the winding path again, visit the bears, and sit once more in their sunlit kitchen. She would listen to the stories of the trees and perhaps in time hear more of the secrets the forest held. But for now she carried the forest in her heart. Every shadow, every bird call, every rustle of leaves reminded her that magic exists. In patience, in kindness, in the quiet places of the world. And the forest, ancient, wise, alive, promised always to welcome her back whenever she chose to return. With that promise, Goldilocks continued her life with a quiet certainty, a gentle knowledge that the world is far bigger, stranger and more beautiful than most people ever realize. And deep in her heart, she knew she had glimpsed something rare, a world alive with stories waiting patiently for those who take the time to notice. The forest whispered, the bears lived on in their cottage, and Goldilocks walked her own path, forever changed, forever remembering, forever carrying the magic of that hidden, timeless place wherever she went. And so the story ends, not with a loud conclusion or a dramatic flourish, but with a quiet, enduring promise. That wonder is always there, just beyond the edge of the ordinary, waiting for those who will see it.